picture.
Yeah.
And you really have to see it in person to understand. And to understand, I think,
I'd love to be able to see the tattoo on that one.
they know food comes from trucks. Basically, this has been something that I have been trying to work on since 2011. In 2011, I got all these pictures of these horses. A lot of them had what looked like, some of them had some chemical burns, at least that's what it looked to me to be. And we broke this on Facebook, and it circulated. We had people nationally and internationally wanting to help, and there was a lot of attention. I had it covered on 3 different, local stations, and they filmed and they went out, and basically what I met with was opposition from the county and the state to move these horses. You got to understand that locals love the horses. They want to go out and see them. They want to be with them on the weekends and ride their 4-wheelers and show them to their kids. So it's been an ongoing thing for 10, 20 or more years. So keep that in mind as to why it's going to be difficult to tackle it. So thousands of horses are on abandoned mines in West Virginia. It goes outside of West Virginia as well, Kentucky, Ohio, I've heard the same, Virginia and so forth. We are going to deal with West Virginia. The pictures you're going to see are pictures that I've been receiving since 2011. I don't know where any of these horses are now. I don't know what happens to any of these horses, but and you can see this is a reclaimed mine site. It's mostly rock, it's a lot of brush, it's not lush green, nutritious grass. That's not what you find up there. These were pictures. This particular herd had a horse that had a broken leg, and I kept getting pictures of this herd because they desperately wanted me to be able to move this horse this last winter. It was a really bad winter. The horse eventually died from what she said. The next picture shows the horses on an active road. It's not a mine road, and I just received these pictures maybe a week ago. So they're in the road. You can see this 4-lane highway, and they're all across the road. People are trying to get to work in the morning, and the horses are just in the road. They do get hit. People have hit them. People are hurt. Horses are hurt. This was in Boone County. This is a couple of years ago. Again, no idea whatever happened to these horses. Same thing. These were Boone County mine horses and a mule that we were asked to be able to go in and move these horses. We couldn't do it, and it's really discouraging to continue for years to get video and pictures and have to tell them when they're coming to you, people are seeing this and coming to you to help, and have to say, no, I can't help you. This is the horse I was talking about that kind of started the whole process in 2011, and the face is just, I have never seen anything like it. This horse actually lived through this, and when the news stations went out and filmed, you could see this horse in the herd, and it had healed to some degree. It was still very thin, and its face didn't have a lot of hair, but in the news footage, this horse was still there in the herd. So this is a very old picture from back in 2011 with the paint. This colt had some open wounds and so forth. This was in Mingo County, and this is from this year. These are Kentucky, I think both of these are Kentucky herds. There's a girl who documents the herds, and her name's actually down there. Gets beautiful pictures of them, but while she thinks it's a beautiful thing to go up and see, she sends them to me aware that the horses need out of there. They don't thrive, but she's been documenting them for years, so she has hundreds and hundreds of photos, and she knows the herds really well in Kentucky, not so far from where we are right now. So being that Heart of Phoenix is the only 501c3 working horse rescue in the state, it does fall on us, I think, to kind of spearhead something. But we have to have legislation. So that's what I want to talk to you mostly about, the process of what do we need to do to start the ball rolling where we can legally, effectively go in and en masse start to work on these herds in West Virginia. We're going to talk about legislative changes, working with the landowners and the mine companies, how we would go about removing the horses, and long-term goals to control the size of these herds, because you're talking about thousands and thousands of horses. How do they end up abandoned? These are not wild horses. These are not Mustangs. These are mostly horses that have been turned out by local people to gain weight for free so that they can pick them up once they gain weight and take them to auction or sell directly. It's a free way for the horses, for them to keep large numbers of horses. And so it's not usually people that want to keep the horses. It's for money's sake. It's horse traders that perpetually drop off cheap horses from auction. They let them put on some pounds. If they don't put on the weight, then they're probably going to leave the horse out there. And so certain horses have been out there for years. Locals will say this horse was dropped off 2 years ago. It's been out here for 3 years, 6 months, 11 months. So some of the horses are never removed, and that's where you get the feral horse, where they breed and then the foals can't be caught, and then they grow up and it just continues to build an actual feral herd among the friendly domesticated horses that have been owned by people, and a lot of them have spent years with people before they were dropped out there. I have heard instances, many, where they will round up the horses that didn't gain weight or still look bad, they run them through auction, whatever didn't sell, they realize, well, they're never going to sell, they stay. They take them and drop them back off onto the mine, and they'll probably never pick those horses up. So they're going to be the horses that you're going to continually see there as well. And you'll get people that feel like they can't continue to care for the horse, they don't know what else to do, and they know they're dropping the horse off to leave it. So then that horse, if they can't feed it, or maybe animal control's been called because they're not keeping the horse in a good situation, they will load those horses up and they will drop them off with the intention to never go back and recover them at all. So that's kind of where these herds are coming from. Why is it dangerous for the horses to stay out there? Because we hear they're beautiful wild horses. Let them live on the open hills of West Virginia. And I understand, that's sweet. It's a nice thought. However, West Virginia's geography is not friendly to horses. These mountains have been removed. What's underneath the mountains, while it is open space now, is rock. Brush grows. The grass that's growing is not going to be nutritious. And it's also very dangerous. There are pits of water. The water is not water that's really something you would want your horse drinking. In the winter, there's nothing there, so they eat the tree bark. They do starve. They die there. It's not an area that can ever sustain the population, even a small population, so it certainly can't sustain thousands of horses, so that needs to be really clear. The horses in large numbers can't stay there. We have to understand that at no point can the land support horses, and that's just out there. It's not ever going to support horses in a safe way. The horses breed. The mares are bred. They're never going to have a break. They're going to breed. They're going to foal. They're going to be bred back in the foal heap. They're going to foal again. Foals are going to die. Some are going to make it. But they're going to be bred very young. They're going to inbreed, and you're producing numbers of horses when you consider that they're breeding, where they're reproducing, plus people are continuing to drop more and more and more. You're destroying the local ecosystem. You're taking away food sources from wildlife that actually belong in the mountains of West Virginia, and you're destroying the land. you can't imagine what 2,000 horses in Mingo County might be in 10 years because people aren't going to stop dropping them off. You can see here there's some injuries. The horses are in the road. It is not just horses that are being harmed by this process. The miners come down these mountains, they work late hours, the horses are in the way of the equipment. The equipment hits the horses. If the horse is a 1,200-pound horse, imagine what kind of threat that poses to a car. It's not a 100-pound deer, and they can do a lot of damage. Imagine what a 1,200-pound horse does through your windshield. So the horses, frequently I get emails about horses with broken legs and injured, horrifically injured. The horses fall down in pits and things, and there are some images I've been sent in video of a mare that went down into a spot on the mine, and they had to bring in equipment and get her out. And the miners worked to do that, and that was a great situation. At least they were willing to help. But there's a huge danger in the roadways to both people, the miners, and to the horses. This is what I was talking about. So this mare went down into a culvert area on the mine, and they had to work, all day, and they got her out, and they had nothing, they couldn't treat her. I mean, she had no access to vet care, so they just got her up out of there. She limped off with her foal, and that's not acceptable. So the mine sites, they're never going to be safe for these horses. And you can see, what an effort there was, and you can see there's a crane there to get her out of the area where they had bulldozed over, and probably she thought the footing was safe, but it wasn't, compacted dirt, and she, stepped into it, and she's fell on down, the hill.
Or something spooked her.
Yeah. So the steps to solve this issue, because it seems like, and it's easy to say, it's too big of a problem, and that's what people have been saying, so we're just not going to deal with it. But that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for the people in these areas, and it's not acceptable to the horses in the areas either. The first step is legislative changes. The only way that's going to happen is if we work with the land companies that own this land and the mine companies that lease this land. I believe that a lot of them want to be really cooperative and want to help, because it damages their business. They cannot reclaim these mine sites and plant the required amount of trees if the horses are going in and eating the trees. It's costing them countless amounts of money when they're fined when you're supposed to have this number of trees and the horses ate all the trees during the winter because they are starving. And it also, if you consider that, you want these areas reclaimed. It's very important for the ecosystem that these areas successfully be reclaimed. And if the horses are preventing that, it's not just costing the land companies money or the mines money. It's damaging West Virginia's land even more so. So you simply can't ignore it that way. So rescues need to have legal protection to go onto this land. We cannot put an organization in danger that serves the horse community by going in and illegally moving the horses. We can't do that. It's trespassing. The locals, we don't have any protection. The locals don't want the horses moved. So we have to have laws that protect us completely if we go in an organized way and remove the horses. The locals will, go back that one. The locals will often claim ownership to prevent the horses from being moved as well. So there has to be a way to establish that if the horse is found on the mine, there's legislation that says the horse is considered abandoned and therefore property of possibly the land owners to then work with us and allow us to then, to go in with protection. The land and mine companies need to work with the rescues to form an outline of when we have legislation that says if a horse is found on a mine, it's considered abandoned from that moment, and that they have a plan so that you don't have groups of individuals coming in to load these horses up. That doesn't protect the horses in the long run. You're actually asking for the same people who drop them off to come in and take the horses out and do it somewhere else. So it needs to be that we're working with established rescue organizations only to remove these horses. And the second thing, after we have legal authority to go in, we're going to need to discourage it from happening So you're going to need heavy fines that are enforced in these counties for anyone found dropping the horses off. If you have fines and it's posted that if you drop off a horse, there is a fine of $1,000, and it's actually enforced, eventually people will get the idea. You know, if there's a risk, they're not going to do it in near the numbers they do now. And then also fines if you're caught going in and illegally removing the horses, not following the letter of the law, so that we prevent traders or meat buyers from going in and saying, well, this is awesome, let's just load up, and that happens now, and no one's really doing anything about it. So we want to discourage unethical people from picking them up while we have protection as a rescue group to go in and remove them and make sure they're going to safe situations. So we can't go in and remove all of the horses at once. So let's assume we have the legislation we need. We've got that, we have the fines, we have ways to deter people from further dropping them off. Now we're still faced with 2,000 horses in Mingo County alone, at least. So what do we do to control the numbers and sort and so forth? We want to build a list of vets that are willing to work with us. We want to make sure that we're looking at cost-effective options, grants, and funding to cover the cost so that we can have gelding clinics where we go out and the horses that can't be removed are gelded while we work on the problem. So we are limiting reproduction. Obviously, you're still going to have the occasional stallion coming in, but cut the numbers down to where everything out there is gelded as much as possible. Have teams that are trained to handle this. You cannot go out and start, just rounding these horses up. The terrain is dangerous. So have people that are competent, that they have some training, that they understand the land, and they understand safe ways of getting these small herds rounded up. Because if you go out there, you could certainly yahoo your way around and cause a lot of damage and hurt a lot of horses, and the mines are not going to allow that liability. So we need a plan to show that trained people would be going out there and removing the horses safely, and the liability of the land companies and the mines, would be greatly reduced. We would want to set up euthanasia options for those that are injured and not able to be rehabbed, or very senior, or dangerous, and do that in a way that is, make sure it's a humane process. We want a list of criteria to know which horses should be removed first. What criteria? We don't want to go in and, well, I feel sorry for this one and this one. We want to remove the horses that we can place so that we open up spots quickly to go in again. So have an idea of what makes the horse, a candidate for being one of the first removed, and going in and making sure that we're following that guideline so that we keep a steady flow of horses coming out. And then creating an identification system and catalog of horses. And this would really entail working with local people that care, because they've been following these herds for years. A lot of them know the herds. They know when the foals were born. They have names for these herds. They know where they tend to be. So working with local people so that we have an idea and a catalog of the horses, and understanding as much as we can about the horses that are out there, how many years have they been out there, and giving us a good idea of then tying into the criteria of which horses to remove. If we work with the locals, we're going to know which horses are likely born out there, and therefore going to take a longer time to rehab and place and stuff like that. So removing adoptable horses and getting them to rescues or suitable homes. I've been trying to work on a list of rescues nationwide that are willing to assist over the long haul in removing horses. If you can get a commitment from 10 rescues to take 2 horses and keep 2 horses, and that's a steady flow, it's a lot of horses moving out. It's not been particularly easy to get participation early on. We don't have a lot of information, so that's kind of the point of this, to put the information out there and a lot of photos. And we've had some talk with the land companies about possibly donating per horse removed, because it's to their financial advantage to get the horses off the land and not have damage to the sites. So the second thing would be creating a list where private homes submit to some level of screening, so that as we move them out, maybe some can go directly into homes. And creating an action plan that outlines which horses would be removed, which we've kind of talked about. already. So how long will the process take, and how will we fund this project? The process, I think it's a 10-year process to see huge numbers removed. I think we could see a lot of horses removed in 5 years, but in 10 years I think we could really get a handle on it if we start now. And funding is going to be something that I think the land companies really come in, and once there's a lot of action, maybe some grants could be attained. Short-term goals, 1 to 3 years, seeing the laws changed. Here's the issue with the laws. If we introduce legislation at the beginning of the 2015 session, that legislation does not apply until the next year. That's the unfortunate part, and that's the part that is going to be very hard for people to understand. And it means we're waiting a long time for horses we've seen and handled, and some will not survive that long. Whether there could be some type of emergency legislation, I do not know. That is something we should find out, and it's something I want to look more into. And if there are ways around it to do, moving certain horses, that's something we do not know yet. Building teams that have permission to be on the sites. It will never be able to be a free-for-all, so we have to establish early on, train competent people, and have a running list of people that the mines and the land companies know. They're not going to let people they do not know out there loading these horses up. You want to present an organized front with qualified people. I would think that having teams with a vet on site is always going to be a good idea, with an established group that the mines know. And always, when we're working for legislative changes, we have to have people calling. We have to have people letting our representatives know this is important. While if the mine companies and the land companies push it, that is great, and I think that's key. We have to remember that when these bills come up, that we're calling and pushing action and making people aware, so that it doesn't get shuffled and lost and never passed. Because every year that it passes, you're pushing yourself off 2 years, because you have to wait for the next year's session and then a year for it to become law. So that's so important, that the first step is legislation and not dropping the ball there, because if that doesn't happen, we can't do anything. And working on funding is something we can do right now and continue to do in the short term. Long-term goals in 5 to 10 years would be the gelding clinics, and you're going to see natural selection take hold during this time. If we're able to geld and remove the highly adoptable horses, by process of elimination, there are horses that are not going to make it through winters that we can't move because of the sheer numbers, and you're going to see the population decrease if there's no breeding, and if fines are in place that are preventing more from being dropped off. You're going to see those numbers rapidly decline at that point. And then, complete removal of mares and foals by this point, if they're not completely feral, and getting them into rescues and private homes. So, in review, understanding that we need legislation introduced in 2015. We have to get that done. If we find that the land and mine companies aren't pushing for it in 2015, we certainly can go to our representatives and ask them to sponsor a bill. Work up some language that is passable, not idealistic. Realistic language in a bill that pertains both to being able to remove these horses in a rapid way and pertaining to fines for those dropping the horses off. Getting groups established right now where the large herds are located and working with the landowners. We can do that right now. We can establish a running list of competent people and find out what their strengths are and what they bring to the table, so that we have groups in place. If we let the legislation pass and we aren't ready to then pick up the ball and start, we've wasted a lot of time. We can right now identify funding sources. Having that ready to go if legislation passes, it would be very discouraging to see the legislation passed and find that we are not prepared at that point to go in and do anything other than move 2 or 3 horses. Making sure that we have the teams organized, that we know we have people able to actually go out and handle this well-intended people that care and they want to fund, but having people that are horse people able to go out and handle safely getting these horses. Because when Cindy and I went out there, I can see going out there with the wrong team of 20 people, you could have a disaster. And then what are the counties going to say if you go in and you injure horses trying to move them, and what kind of mess is going to be made? So understanding that trained people are completely key. Legislation, funding, and trained teams able to remove the horses are the three things that we can actually work on right this minute. And I think that that's the clear goal. We can't go in and move the horses that we've shown you right this minute, but we can do those three things and make sure that that we're working toward being able, when we go out there and we handle these horses, that we can actually then put them on a trailer and get them out of there safely. My last slide, yay! So can we show the ones from? So we went out there yesterday, Cindy from Central Virginia Horse Rescue and I went out to see them firsthand. It took us about an hour to get out onto the mine. And once we were out there, we were able to see within a span of about 2 miles, 5 herds, and 60 plus horses compromising these herds. What you find is a stallion, and you find mares and a lot of foals, and mares bred back. We found these are bones of horses that have died out there, and we were told by the locals it'd be easy to go and see carcasses, and we didn't make it that far. It started to get dark. The condition of the horses overall is poor, and this is a good time of year. You'll have certain horses that are on certain parts where there's more grass and they're doing a little better, but the conditions were poor enough that these horses are going to be skeletons come winter. You can see the mare's emaciated and bred back. This mare, I've actually had video of her injured, and you see some mares with twins out there, which was really unusual for me. Yeah, there are the twins for one mare. And most of the horses come right up to you. They're very friendly, even the ones you may suspect have been born out there. They're used to seeing people, which works to our advantage. They come right up, they're expecting grain. Local people take out corn and things and put it out for them. So, some of the herds were a little less apt to come up. This mare was recently dropped off, less than probably a week ago. And so you can see going out and walking among them and having to leave them there is a really hard thing to do, especially for me. And you can see, this is what we encountered with each herd. There were horses that were looking to us for help. So I know local people really enjoy seeing them, and it's been something that a lot of people have denied even exists. So understanding that it's not good for the horses, getting local communities to understand. We appreciate that you care about the horses, but if you really care, you've got to work with us to get them off these sites. So that particular horse had sunburned and had. We made no efforts to find them, understanding that we didn't search these horses out. We literally drove up the road and they were everywhere. We could have gotten most of these pictures without getting out of the truck. They were just that, and you can see they congregate around the vehicles. They expect you to be bringing them something.
They're eating corn off the ground.
Yeah, you could see corn had just been poured out there, and they were expecting us to bring them something. So while that's going through, so my question is are there thoughts that you guys would have that I haven't covered as to things that can be done? Because I certainly don't know everything about this by any stretch of the imagination. Those are things that I've come up with just mulling it over for years. That's where I am.
Some of the things that have been suggested to me have been branding and microchipping the animals that are there. It would discourage people from taking them and dropping them off freely. Also possibly mare birth control, like they do with the wild herds. They dart them and at least keeps them from having foals for a couple years.
Yeah. I think branding would be a really good tool to discourage them from moving them, and also let us know if they pop up somewhere else.
Yes.
You know, it'd give us an idea of how they move, because it would take time before people are enforcing the laws and finding people, and you might see these horses circulate to various sites.
I'm pretty sure when they have had horses at some of these auctions that they say are out of the coal mines, that they weren't talking about working in the coal mines. They were talking about abandoned on the coal mines.
Well, and we actually ran across a Craigslist ad in Kentucky where they actually go out and just take pictures of them on the lines and sell them off of the mine. So there was an ad that we saw maybe 3 weeks ago, and there were hundreds of horses, and it was just come out, and if you catch them, they're cheaper. If I have to catch them, they're more. And, you know, so that's how overlooked it is, that somebody feels that comfortable. Well, we want to make that person not feel that comfortable.
Right.
We want some repercussions. But branding them, I think would be, you know, it's simple, it's an easy process, it's not difficult. You know, and having something that maybe goes through the state, a state-approved brand that they, you know, work up, that we put on there to, you know, this horse was at some point abandoned on a West Virginia mine. I think that would be, you know, really excellent.
The start of legislation, do we have someone that can start writing the bill and someone that will present the bill?
I think that it would be a good idea for us to work up language. They're going to then do what they want to do with the language once it's in the hands of, you know, they'll send it down and they'll work it up, and we may find that some of our expectations can't be met right off, and I don't know enough about current laws to say what we can even do. So it really, we do need to kind of identify.
Do you have a legislator that is friendly to this, that would sponsor the bill?
We have two that I think that even without help from, you know, land and mine companies that may work with us, that we probably need to get in touch with and see what actually do you think would fly. So if we would work up right now, this is what we wanted to say, what do you think? And start whittling it down and actually present. We don't want to present our idealistic thoughts when session starts. We want to present those now, make it workable, get it to where it's something somebody would look at and not say this is not possible and set it aside. You want to present, you know, at the beginning of session in 2015, something that is sensible, that they take seriously. So what that would be, I can't say, but it would be a good idea to work with those few legislators, maybe identify more that are friendly, but most of them are not aware of this, especially the northern, you know, their minds aren't up there, they're not seeing that up there. Some of the local, you know, delegates and senators are going to know about this, but a lot of our population and so forth up the northern state aren't. Happens to me all the
I
time.
hate it when my thoughts go out the window. Are you anticipating the land companies bearing the cost?
When I met with the land companies that I met with, they seemed open to bearing the cost. However, that can always change. So that's going to be the question. A lot of what we can do and the magnitude of what we can do is going to hinge on funding. And if we work with, you know, 501c3 organizations where these companies are getting a tax write-off for donations, I think it's to their benefit, and I think that we have strong possibilities that they would follow through with those suggestions that they made to me. But that's my hope. If that did not work out, then we're up against it. But, you know, I think if there's enough attention, hopefully there are, you know, enough national attention, you may be surprised at the amount of funding that would come in.
Yeah, I think you can get funding from the different funding organizations. There's several that would step up to this,
Yeah.
but I think that even just the identification and gelding is, and I mean, just sorting and corralling, not even talking about moving them off of the mines, just that portion of it is going to be expensive.
Yeah.
And when you propose legislation, you're gonna have a plan as to who's gonna pay for it, because that's what they're gonna wanna know.
But you'd have to have somebody take ownership of them, right? And say, okay, well now I have these horses, they're mine, and yes, you can come in and you can do that.
That's what I would hope that the legislation would put kind of put the ownership to the state, and that's whether the state's going to be willing. It really can't, the mines aren't going to allow legislation that puts the burden on them, that they claim ownership. So, and I understand that, so I think what the legislation would have to do is say if a horse is found on a land company's mine on a reclaimed site, that the state of West Virginia has the authority to then go in and assign a team to handle it right off. That there's no run an ad in the paper, there's no 3 weeks, there's no then the horse has to go to auction. I mean, that there's none of that red tape, that it is all bypassed in the state of West Virginia, just as if it were a seizure, but that there's a speedy process to where you're there, you're on that reclaimed mine site, whoever put you there has forfeited their ownership, that this horse is in the property of the state of West Virginia, and the state of West Virginia has designated this chain of action with these organizations. And whether that will fly, I guess we'll have to see. That would be my hope, best case scenario.
I think at that point, if you're going to assign ownership, then I think the landowners, the state would require the landowners to contribute to a fund for the horses.
I think we're going to have a lot of luck with legislation if the land companies lobby with us and let them know up front, we are willing to fund this, and you're going to have to push the environmental aspect heavily for them to understand, because getting people to care about horses is not as easy as getting people to understand that your land in West Virginia is being destroyed as a byproduct of these herds on the land. So I think making the connection to legislators that you're hurting your state. The connection to animal welfare is not everybody's thing, but is generally well accepted to say that your state is being damaged by these populations, and then you bring more people into the team and concerned at the Capitol anyway.
Because this is private property, right?
This is all private property. It's all private property that is owned by land corporations that then lease the land to mines. And I do not know how much of the burden falls on the mine to reclaim the sites after they're through mining, and how much of the burden falls on the land companies. But there's a burden on one or the other or both to then reclaim these sites to, I guess, EPA criteria. And so if you see the damage that they're doing it in the winter, and the pictures I've seen, they're wreaking havoc up there. So it's just a matter of time. You have so many years to reclaim these sites. If these horses are completely destroying those efforts, there's a huge amount of money to be lost. So understanding that contributing to a fund and getting these horses out is economically their best bet.
And also persecuting the people that are dropping them off and causing this big hassle for them.
Yes, and also if that, this probably wouldn't play a big factor into funding, but if they really did enforce the fines, that could be designated money to go right back into the effort to remove the horses. It's getting the counties to really, we have good laws in terms of animal cruelty in West Virginia. They're not enforced, so we don't want to run into that same thing, that we passed this law that says you're fined $1,000 if you're caught dumping, and everybody knows this guy's dumping, and nobody in the county wants to push and enforce the law. So that would be another hurdle. They're tight-knit communities. They have accepted this for many years. So it's going to be hard to then convince law enforcement they need to take these laws seriously, perhaps, right off. But so it's going to be a lot of education in the communities, maybe working up handouts that explain it and circulating why this is not to your advantage in your community to let it continue to go on. And even though I didn't even mention that, I do think that to some degree, handing out some type of sensible information to these people and circulating it over time is going to influence the thoughts of some of the community.
Well, let's look at, from their point of view, they go up in the summer and the horses look great because the weather's good and the grass is good. How many of those people are going up there in the winter
In February.
and seeing them when they're you know, when it's freezing cold, it's icy and snowy, and they're starving.
Yeah, and that's a thing for people to understand outside of West Virginia, and it's something that I think Cindy could see yesterday is these are little communities. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody loves these horses. And that's going to be true in Mingo County, and Boone County, and Logan County, McDowell County. And they're rural, they're hard to get to. They are not open to outsiders coming in to just do what they want. They are very protective of both the horses and the mining that's going on. And no matter what anyone thinks, that is the case, and you're going to be working against that to some degree. It is good that a lot of us are local, and I know people that live in these counties, so it's not complete outsiders coming in, but they are very protective. When I've talked to the local law enforcement in 2011, they were aggressively opposed to removing horses. So understanding that you are fighting that uphill battle to change minds and to present, understanding we probably need to go out in the winter and document this winter. It's not something anybody's going to want to do, because what you're going to see will be brutal and sad, and you'll be powerless to move those horses, and you'll be powerless to help those horses. But if you could work up a really good bit of footage to show what they look like in January, showing them now and showing what they look like come February and showing what they look like come March, April, would go a long way. It really would go a long way. It would be hard to deny it. And that's been part of why I've collected these images since 2011. I've saved every image I've been sent, because you have a lot of denial that the horses are there, but you also have denial that the conditions are bad. And for me, the conditions are bad right now, but they're not what they're going to be. So, having a team of, a few people that would commit to going out, and it's a long drive from here, but going out and documenting what's going on in video and pictures through this winter would be a lot of, and taking it even to session when they allow you to go over there and kind of lobby.
Can you go there without a four-wheel drive?
You could not get to these places without a four-wheel drive. No, that's another thing.
And in the winter, you're going to need a four-wheel drive with chains.
Or a four-wheel drive four-wheeler. I don't know how you would even.
With chains.
Yeah. I mean, it's.
Or a horse.
Yeah, or a
Ride a
horse.
horse.
You go out on horseback. I mean,
Right.
I would not want to ride a horse up there with those stallions.
that's
just
the thing. And the stallions are going to be very aggressive.
Yeah.
You can tell the fighting that's been done between the stallions and sorting out the pecking order and which group gets which mare. So yeah, a horse up there would be that you would be it would be dangerous.
I'm sure people do it, but I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. So getting up there is going to be a problem in the winter. It would be very difficult. Frankly, just getting to Mingo County in the winter is a difficult thing if you've ever been. But to go, I mean, like in good weather yesterday, like I said, it took us an hour to drive out there once we were in Mingo County.
Once we got on the mine road,
Yes.
it took us an hour
Yes.
to get to the top.
Yeah, and it's not much distance, but it's it's up and down, and there's a lot of holes, and you have to travel very slowly. So in the winter, you would need not just a four-wheel drive, but you'd need to be very brave. But I think if we let this winter go by without documenting it, we've done a disservice to them. So
I'm willing to come back and go up.
yeah, we really, and I think having brought outside attention is good, because a lot of this, somebody that doesn't have a dog in the fight per se, no local connections, because local people, it's easy when just the local people know about it to keep it quiet. And that's thus the title, The Quiet Crisis, which seems dramatic, but you go out there and you see it firsthand. I've seen pictures, and I've seen a feral horse here and there and a mine horse here and there, but I've never been out and walked around with them. And I've documented all this time, and part of me did not want to go out because I was aware how I would feel about it. And it's very easy to want something done but not feel it that deeply until you've walked out there with them. And then it changes everything about it. Go out there and then you see it firsthand, and you know that's the only thing you can do. You can't do anything else. There's no way to overlook it. There's no other option. and you feel then accountable. You've said you've handled the horses, and now you're personally involved. So I think I would encourage anyone when we do have the permission to go out, as a group onto land that maybe is harder to get to and see more horses. You go out and you touch them, you're not ever going to be the same. So you're really going to feel it very strongly if you're a horse lover. So, but I think in terms of what I can say, that's about all I have to tell you all. And I hope that this videoed and we can get this out there, because there are a lot of questions. You simply cannot answer them typing on the computer. So I want the video. I'll put it on YouTube. Do share it widely and circulate it so that people who are asking questions just out of ignorance, because they have no way to know any better, understand all the facets of the problem and the possible solutions, and they can then decide if they want to get involved or not, but and get in contact with us.
And
vote
for Heart of Phoenix Equine Rescue on Tractor Supply's Rescue a Rescue contest every day until midnight the 14th. Thank you. Hooray!
Yay.